Hi, I'm Scott Smith, the Budget Director here at the Douglas County School District. Here at Douglas County, we believe in site-based budgeting for our school's budget process. At many school districts, schools are allocated a number of teachers and money for supplies and other materials, and they have no flexibility about how to spend that money. Here in Douglas County, we believe that principals are the closest to their communities and their students, and that they have the best knowledge to make the best decisions for their particular school. Therefore, schools have a lot of autonomy when it comes to developing their budget, and the schools should be working with their community and their SACs to have a conversation about what the budget priorities are in their specific school. This way, principals know what's important to their particular stakeholders and are able to make their budget decisions for their schools based on those priorities. We really want our parents to understand how this process works, so I'm going to take a few minutes to walk through one of our school's SBB worksheets. This is an example of a real SBB worksheet at one of our schools. So this is a real elementary school in our district in the 13-14 school year. The way that our budget allocations work is at the top you'll see the SBB PA, or the Student-Based Budget Pupil Allocation. That is multiplied by the number of students in your building to come up with a dollar amount that is completely at the discretion of the principal. The second allocation you'll see is called Remaining I&D, or Innovation and Development. This again is a dollar amount that is on a per pupil basis across our entire school district. The last allocation in the top grades section is a mill levy allocation on a per pupil basis for all students district-wide. As you move down into the light blue section, these are discretionary allocations that are allocated for a specific purpose, but the principal is under no obligation to staff these positions in these amounts. So a principal is welcome to have more FTEs in their building, full-time equivalents, or fewer if they so choose. So there are allocations at this school for a principal, for assistant principals, volunteer coordinators, and health assistants. Again, that $179,000 there is completely discretionary. The principal can choose how they want to allocate that money in their school. Moving down the next section, the pink section, is our non-discretionary section. So non-discretionary means that the principal needs to spend this money on its intended purpose. For areas like special education, this is because of statute and mandates that we have to staff our special education at certain ratios. If you move down to the fourth line there's an allocation called Close the Gap. This is an allocation to help our schools close achievement gaps with our at-risk students. Every school is allocated a dollar amount for each at-risk kid in their building, and the principal has discretion on how they want to spend that money as long as they're addressing achievement gaps in their building. As we move further down the pink section, there are more non-discretionary allocations. So this school has 2 FTEs for ESL specialists in their building. There is an allocation of just over $20,000 for gifted and talented in this building. That's on a per pupil basis for all students in the building, not just the gifted and talented students in that building. In the middle section, you'll see some allocations for IB. This school is not an IB school, so they don't have any allocations for that, but if they were, you would see dollar amounts in that section. Moving down towards the bottom of the non-discretionary section, you'll see some other programmatic offerings at this school. So this school has 1.25 FTEs for the Discovery and World Language program. They're allocated $35,000 for the Strategic Planning Grant, which is for professional development. The per pupil amount for the READ Act is allocated out to the schools. As you move down towards the bottom, this school has 2 FTEs for reading recovery and also has a 1.0 FTE for a custodian at this school. The bigger the school is, the more custodians that they will have. This is an elementary school, and they only have 1 custodian at this particular school. After the non-discretionary section, you'll see that there's a peach section at the bottom called Other Discretionary. So there are other allocations that schools get throughout the school year that will be posted down in this section. So the first one is carryover from the 12-13 school year. This school carried over just over $74,000. So this was money they didn't spend in the prior year, and instead of losing it, they reallocated it in the next year so that they can make strategic decisions for their school's spending. Next, we have $105 per pupil of one-time money that was allocated out, and 2 allocations called co-curricular and classified sub. They obviously have very specific names, but again, it's discretionary. The principal can spend that money any way they want. The second to last allocation you'll see is a fee waiver reimbursement. Our schools collect instructional fees, and occasionally they waive those fees based on a family's ability to pay. In order to create more equity across the district, we look at schools that waive higher than the district average and reimburse those schools so they don't have to foot the cost of waiving all of those fees. The last allocation you'll see is a miscellaneous allocation that was provided to this school from the instructional leadership team. Occasionally throughout the school year, a school will have a need that they don't have the ability to meet through their SBB budget. They will reach out to the instructional leadership team to present their case for the additional resources, and our instructional leadership team will provide those resources on a case-by-case basis to these schools. You will see that this school has a total allocation of just over $3.8 million and a balanced budget with expenses in the same amount. Now that we've looked at all the resources that schools get allocated, let's take a look at how they budget for their expenditures. When a principal builds their school's budget, the first section that they're going to look at is the license and administrative staffing. You can see that this school has a full-time principal, a full-time assistant principal, and a full-time BRT. Moving down from there, you will see all of the teachers that this school has budgeted for. You might also notice that all of the teachers have the same costs on the budget worksheet. That's because from a budgetary perspective, all of our teachers have the same average salary and benefits. As a district, we budget on average salaries so that a principal doesn't have to make a hiring decision based on the actual salary that a teacher will earn. As you continue to move down in that section, you will see that this school has a library media professional, a counselor, some RTI specialists, and their special education teachers. Moving on to the second page of the budget worksheet, you can see that this principal has also decided to purchase extra days above the contract year for their BRT and for their teacher. The next section is the classified staffing. So as I mentioned above, this school was allocated a 1.0 for a custodian, and that's the first position that you see in this classified staffing section. This school also has a secretary, a clerical position, a registrar, and a health assistant. There are educational assistants and educational assistants for severe needs students. Lastly, they have budgeted for a librarian alternate and a volunteer coordinator. The next section down is where a school will budget for their non-salary expenditures, so the things that they're buying, like supplies and textbooks and other consumables. You can see that this school has budgeted a total of $226,000 on their non-salary expenditures. One thing I'd like to point out is if you look on the second line of that section, highlighted is a line for carryover with a budget of just over $83,000. After the school met all of their needs, they were able to set aside $83,000 to plan for carryover into the next year. The next section is for support services and where a school will budget for their staff development costs. So you can see that this school has budgeted for some staff development, for some supplies, and then for their strategic planning grant when you get down onto the third page, which is an allocation that they were given that we talked about in that non-discretionary section above. At the very bottom of the page is a summary of how the school has budgeted all of their dollars. You can see that this school has budgeted just under $5,800 per student, $5,796 to be exact. You can also see that this school has over 53 FTEs in their building. I want to be clear, these are not 53 people, these are 53 full-time equivalents that are in that building. So for example, an educational assistant that works 7 hours a day for 176 days is a 0.59 FTE. A teacher that works full-time is a 1.0 FTE. This school has over 53 FTE in their building. Now that we've walked through the SBB worksheet, I'd like to walk you through some other expenditures we have at the district that are in direct support of schools but do not show up on schools' budgets. On this page, we're going to take a look at some expenditures that are budgeted at the district level that are in direct support of schools but aren't reflected on the SBB worksheet. The first area that I'd like to take a look at are interfund transfers. In order to increase transparency, we use different funds to record expenditures for very specific purposes. The interfund transfers we have this year are to our risk management fund, which is largely for workers' compensation, athletics and activities, transportation, capital projects, and our certificates of participation lease payment fund. You can see the dollar amounts associated with each of these transfers at about $31 million in total. In order to convert these interfund transfers into per pupil amounts, we looked at what percentage of these expenditures would be attributable to schools. For example, if you look at our risk management transfer, this allocation was assumed that 80% of these expenditures are attributable to schools. We know that more than 80% of our employees are in schools, but we believe this to be a conservative estimate of these expenditures. Applying that methodology to all of our interfund transfers, you can see that the district budgets approximately $554 per student for these interfund transfers. The next section to walk through are some department budgets that are budgeted at the district level but are used in direct support of students. So some examples of those departments would be our utilities department, safety and security, custodial, and grounds and maintenance. I'd like to be clear on the safety and security and the custodial. As many of you may know, our middle schools and high schools are allocated safety and security staff. This budget is above and beyond those allocations to our schools and would include the school marshal program. You will also remember from the beginning of this presentation that our schools are allocated custodial staff. The custodial staff recognized here is above and beyond what is allocated to schools. Using the same methodology as the interfund transfers, you can see that the district budget's approximately $326 per student for these department budgets that are in direct support of our schools. Using this example elementary school, you will see that this school is spending just under $6,700 in direct support of their students. Now that we've walked through an example SBB worksheet, you may have some questions about what your school's budget looks like. We encourage you to reach out to your school accountability committee. In the interest of transparency, every year the budget department compiles a comprehensive budget book that walks through the entire district budget, our individual schools, and our individual departments. If you'd like more information about any part of the district's budget, please reference that budget book on the Financial Transparency website, which is accessible through the Douglas County School District website. Thank you.